Okay. Yay!
Am I on?
Yes,
You can see my face.
I can. Yeah.
That is so weird because I didn't do anything differently, but everything came up this time.
Yeah, your name even came up as Lina Duncan this time, which it wasn't before.
That's cool.
How
Let me
are
just
you?
sort out. I'm all right, but feel really tired today. How are you?
I'm good. It's a busy, busy week.
Is it for you as well?
Yeah, I've all online stuff to be fair, but it's still just busy. We've got an online
Yeah.
takeover of Make Birth Better's Instagram. We've got the Big Give campaign. Obviously, it's Baby Loss Awareness Week, so it's quite an intense one this week.
Well, that's a lot as well.
Okay.
Heavy, heavy.
Well, thank you anyway. I appreciate you taking the time. I think the difference this time, actually, I've just seen it's come up as neighborhood doulas. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's a different account.
Maybe. Random.
Well, thank you so much. I just thought we could have a free flow chat and then I will edit, send it to you for review, and then we'll share it throughout the campaign if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
So, do you know about the Big Give campaign, Women and Girls?
A little bit. I saw like a few people are on it, the big
Yeah.
give.
So quite a few charities tend to join up each year, but we wanted to do a really big push this year just to maximize as much as possible because they double any donations. And White Ribbon Alliance has had um, mixed feelings over the years. The UK branch, should I say? Um, I know that there was a lot of conflict previously, and certain members of the team that are no longer part of the team were not of the desired view. So it has impacted the reputation. So we've spent the past 18 months really trying to build that back, make sure that all of our policies and all of our actions are inclusive and safer for those that we are trying to serve. And as part of that, we also launched the Free From Harm campaign and the resource and education, which you attended.
Hmm.
So I wanted to know, what were your thoughts on the Free From Harm training? How did you find it?
It was really interesting. It was really good. I think I felt quite sick and tired that day, so I was a bit like quiet on the engaging. But yeah, it was really good information and the content was really good. I think you were sick that day. I missed you.
Yes, I was. Oh, I was very ill that day. I was very ill that week in the end. Um, so unfortunately, I had to step out, and it was very last minute as well because I told myself I could push on through, and yeah, my body was saying no. Um, but you were with Amity and Julie, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So the main topic of discussion is around obstetric violence, obstetric racism, and I know you, as the global doula, have lots of experience globally in the birth world, but also have run into and had the unfortunate experience of witnessing obstetric violence. Did you want
Mm.
to tell me a little bit about your experiences and what you've witnessed?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you might have to shut me up.
No,
We were talking about it today, and we teach free classes for neighborhood doulas every
Mhm,
week. Whereas we've just done our 2-year anniversary just passed, and we were actually talking about it today
mhm,
because we had some visitors, and they were not from the UK, but they said the way we talked in our classes, it was so free, and they said that they felt very safe, and they actually said they felt like they witnessed something, they caught something in themselves, felt really uncomfortable about the way they do healthcare in their country. And they said there's like a system of like hierarchy with the doctors, But they said even themselves as midwives, there's a culture of treating people in a certain way. And they said they do have, not very many, but they do have some mix of ethnicity in their country, but not that much. But there's definitely a hierarchy, and there was people like Bangladeshi, Pakistani people and get treated worse than their national people. And so we were addressing kind of the medical racism that people might come up against in the UK.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how to complain and how to maybe change your midwife and how to speak up. But that's what came up, and it was really interesting. So, I mean, that wasn't your question, but it came to my mind first.
But it's all intersecting, isn't it? Everything influences.
And I think because I'm a white woman who's like, I identify as cis heterosexual, but so I come with a lot of privilege, but I've come with like, I've been in so many different cultures, and I've supported like people from about 44 different countries or backgrounds. So I see a lot of, I've seen a lot of great, thriving, consented choice, and like people doing their best birth their way with consent and thriving. But I've also seen a lot of different hierarchies, and I think I started my journey, the first birth I ever saw was horrific, and I was a student midwife. I was in a hospital in Juarez, under the authority of a really lovely perinatal doctor who used to take a bunch of us midwives across the border. We were staying in El Paso and studying in El Paso, and we all had a chance to attend one birth in a government hospital in Juarez. So my very first birth was, I witnessed a 15-year-old. Absolutely. I felt like I was witnessing rape. Like I was so uncomfortable. I felt like vomiting and crying and leaving the room, but she had no one with her because they're not allowed birth partner in the hospital back then. It was in 1997, 98, and she was not allowed a birth partner. And I just saw people come again and again. It was like they were punishing her for being young, and they were doing multiple vaginal exams, but very violently. It was horrible. And I felt like she was very guarded. It must have been very uncomfortable to have two foreign white people in the room without her consent. And so I felt like, understandably, her guard was there. But, gently we reached out. I didn't even know how to support her because it was new. Birth was new to me, to be actually in person. Right. But I just reached out with a hand. Actually, my colleague was very experienced, and she said to me, why don't you offer her physical support, like a hand to hold or a back rub? And that was uncomfortable for me because of my background with whatever. I experienced quite a lot of abuse as a child, so I was uncomfortable offering touch. But I've crossed my comfort zone because I could see she was in so much, she was very vulnerable. So I really simply reached out with touch, and I felt like her barrier completely dropped and she felt safe. It felt like, and where I had some language, I could communicate some in Spanish, and but we witnessed some horrible things, and I ended up speaking to the doctor and like using my body language and saying, wait, because different doctors came to examine her, like maybe in 2 hours, about 8 people came and did vaginal examinations, and she was writhing on the bed. I was like, this is not okay. And I was using my body language and saying, wait. But I was very conscious of being a white woman in a land that is not my country. And, I was observing. I didn't want to be kicked out and leave her alone, but I didn't want to say nothing. Yeah. But it was very violent. But then after the birth, I mean, the whole birth was quite violent. I think they did like fundal pressure, episiotomy. She was lying on her back. It was all non-consented, no explanation. There was a lot of violence, and she was vulnerable, lying down, and everything was being done to her.
No communication with her for her needs and
Nothing. Nothing. And then
Mm.
after the birth, though, I saw a beautiful connection with her baby, which I thought was quite miraculous, because
Given what she just
after
went
that
through.
much violence, to actually have capacity to be vulnerable and connect with her baby. Like, a lot of people would have disassociated and maybe not be able to connect with their baby, but she really did connect. And there were some nice moments in there, which was a bit of a silver lining for her and for us, because it just felt, it makes me shake inside just thinking about it. It was really unpleasant. And that was an everyday occurrence. That was how their culture of birth was. I hope it might
And
be
it's
better now.
interesting. It's interesting that you say that they're not allowed any birth partners. As you know, I'm currently in Jamaica, and I have been supporting some families out here, and some it's been because of loss, but some live and successful births, and the birthing environments are what you see in horror movies. You're taken into a cold, sterile room with curtains hanging to divide the labour ward. So there's no privacy, there's a lack of dignity, and you're not allowed to have your partners there. In public hospital, even in the private hospitals, if you want your husband or partner to be there, you have to pay. And just speaking to mothers, I've spoken to some that had recently given birth, and they were saying how, oh no, that's normal. Men don't come to births. That's not their area. And then another woman had said in our company at the time when we were talking, and she's a much older lady. I think she's 65. I remember her being close to my father's age. She was saying maybe if men had the opportunity to witness birth, they'd have more compassion and more understanding of women's bodies and what we go through. And it's like some of them are starting to come to the realization, but because the culture here is suggestive that no, this is, you come in, you do this by yourself. This is not a life-changing event. This is just part of the process of becoming a parent. And there's no compassion, there's no empathy, there's no humanization of birth. It's ingrained in the culture that, oh, we don't do that. And when they hear about the way we birth in the UK, for example, and that we can have birth partners and you can get into a birthing pool and you can birth at home, and it's not because of poverty, it's through choice that you're birthing at home. It's almost mind-blowing. But even the psychological harm that's being done, I mean, now there are conversations that have started to come to fruition around having more home births with midwife support, but there's still misinformation. And it was just interesting when you said that they couldn't have any partners there, because withholding those choices and that safety and someone that can potentially advocate for you and be a witness is if there is any forms of harm or violence, that's all stripped away, which is isolating, and it leaves people very, very vulnerable and susceptible to the violence. Like you said, you were there, you were able to reach out and provide some comfort. She was able to drop her guard, and that may have then impacted how she did bond with her baby. If you weren't there, like many other births, what would the outcomes be? Would they be carrying this trauma? Are they experiencing this violence with no witnesses, with no one to give a voice to the voiceless, with no one to offer that hand of support? I think it's very scary when we look at what's
Really
happening around the world.
scary and really dehumanizing. And like what you said, like if the men could see the process of birth, then how, the witness of what happens to someone's body giving birth, and how their offspring come into the world. Like, it's such a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So we talk a lot about how it's almost like the burden of conception is on a woman or a birthing person. and then the pregnancy itself, then that falls on the woman or birthing person, and then the labor and birth of the baby falls on the woman or birthing person, and then the feeding of the baby falls to them again. But when we look at when harm is being done, and we have the opportunity to have our advocates and allies step in and stand up for women at their most vulnerable point, do you feel like men have more of a responsibility that they're not uptaking at the moment? It's similar to all gender-based violence. I personally think these conversations are happening more between women and birthing people. Men aren't joining the conversations enough, and yet they are impacted by birth. They either have a mother, or they are the partner of a mother or a sibling or something. So it's not just a woman's issue, but it's a gender-based violence. And I guess my question is, have you found that when working with families, the men engage in supporting and trying to advocate for people's rights?
Interesting question. I've got a million thoughts in my head. I'm like ciphering through them. My first thought that came, I'm thinking Philippines, India, which is where I spent a lot of time, and in the UK. So men weren't at birth at all in the Philippines or India, apart from some. Like, we had birth centers in the Philippines,
Okay.
which we created with Filipino led. They were Filipino led, co-led with and funded by the students that came through the midwifery program, and run but also by experienced, qualified, licensed midwives. But the Filipinos were all licensed, apart from the students, the Filipino students. And in those situations, it was really interesting because some of the people I supported, and I was always signed up for continuity of care, so I would get all the like under 18s, or all the people that had multiple, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pregnancies. They would put my name on there because they knew I liked to do continuity of care. And a lot of those families and young people, they were very keen. The fathers were very keen to attend, especially the young ones, because they felt safe in our clinic. There was no doctors there. Not that doctors are scary, but it was very patient, or they called patients. It was people friendly. They were center. The people who were having a baby were center of the care. And if they had a partner that wanted to be there, they were welcomed. And we would help the partner. We'd show the partner how to do back rubs, or often they would birth on a birthing stool and they would lean on their partner. So they were, resting in between contractions. Then it was so sweet, but it wasn't very cultural. And maybe the older men, so maybe the men in their 40s whose partner was having their 11th or 10th or 8th baby or whatever, those men were hesitant to come because they had not been invited. They were allowed. They weren't allowed. In the government hospital, there was no men in the Philippines or India, not allowed. No birth partner, nobody, not even a female birth partner in government hospitals. So you have, I think one of the issues is a male patriarchal control system, not necessarily men, but the way that we run our systems are so dehumanizing and racist and kind of, I don't know, my image of kind of white man system, like there's no humanity in there. Not that white men can't be nice humans, but do you know what I mean? It's like it's like that kind of worldwide, I guess, white supremacy, like supremacist like models of care where there's a lot of abuse and hierarchy and bullying and oppression. And if you take all that and strip it back and actually create really simple models like Jenny Joseph model of
Yeah.
care, and if you think of Ibu Robin Lim, like systems that are built by and for the people to thrive, to survive. You know, they turned around statistics for infant loss and premature babies. And the system
Mhm.
we had in the Philippines, like people weren't accessing care because it was in one of the most dangerous areas of the city. And because we lived there and we served the people, I was never scared running those streets. That we had to run to the birth center in the night if our pager went off. We had no mobile phone back then, and we would run through the streets, and there was murders happening there. There was drug abuse, there was a big slaughterhouse with pigs squealing in the night. I mean, it was a crazy place to live. Taxis wouldn't go there sometimes because they thought it was so dangerous. But because we were in the community for the community, like we lived
Yeah.
there, we walked the streets, we cared for the people, and it was free access for care. So if they wanted to make
Yeah.
a donation, they could, but they got free care because a lot of people couldn't afford to pay. Whereas if they went to the government hospital, they had to pay up front. So they were like selling their TV, you know, people running around the city, going to pawn shops to sell off whatever they could so that they could buy an IV and buy the suture kit and buy the medication and the oxytocin, syntocinon for induction, because everyone got put in a conveyor belt of medical birth in the hospital. So they
Okay.
came to our little clinic was simple, but it had curtains around the bed, which didn't exist in the hospital. They had privacy, they got dignity and kindness. And so I think when the partners did come in, they liked to be there. But I
Yeah.
think it's like any model of care. If people feel safe and cared for and heard and seen,
Mhm.
then it's a safe place. It doesn't cost anything, but it doesn't make any money.
Yeah. And I think that's a really key point. Um, if we don't have medicalized birth, it's not profitable, and healthcare is business,
Hmm.
which is why now that it's on its knees, healing the healthcare system is going to lose money. And as sad as it sounds, I know it's a much bigger picture, but it's it's not cost effective. If people are having more physiological births and there is kindness and safety and people aren't dying unnecessarily, um, they're not dying from um, illnesses that are, what's the word I'm looking for? Preventable deaths.
Preventable.
Yeah. Then we will have a better care system, but it would be less profitable. You can't monetize that. And I do wonder if a lot of the obstetric violence that we witness has stemmed from making money, which is a horrible conversation to
100%.
have.
I mean, some of it is, but I think some of it is also not knowing better and maybe tied in with dehumanizing people. Because if people have only seen systems that are just like, I mean, some of Philippines was probably the worst. I think it's changed a lot now because I have a colleague that worked with me in India. She went back to the Philippines and she works there again. But she said choice was stripped away. Home births have been made illegal in the Philippines.
Illegal.
Illegal. It's really hard to register a birth. So it's like there's all these systems around the world that try to constrict and set up, you know, like making it's very hard to register a child. Same in India, like the rich and the poor, doesn't matter who you are. If you want a home birth, either because you can't afford to go to hospital or because you choose to have a home birth, the systems make it really hard to
Yes.
register your baby. And if you can't register a baby, you can't get any kind of, what do you call it in India, like a, you know, rice, oil, the basics, like when you're an adult, if you have no identity, you can't go to school, you
Yeah.
can't sign up for, there's no social no social
You can't get a bank account.
benefits.
You can't
But
get.
yeah, it can't, yeah. So it's like you're there's a lot of people with no identity because they were never registered for their birth.
Which then leaves them susceptible to trafficking and other forms of violence and harm. So it's
Exactly. And we saw that. I mean, we knew some of the babies in the Philippines where I was that was sold, and in India as well. I knew people that had to sell their babies for but just survive money. But it's the whole thing is all linked in, and it didn't matter. Like, wealth doesn't matter necessarily. Like with the violence that I saw in India, I saw crazy. Like there was one hospital that was set in a circle. So all the women in active labor were in a circle with no curtains dividing them. And all they could see was each other's vulva, vagina, like if they sat up, but they're all
right.
lying down. And the medical staff were in the middle just doing stuff to them. Like it was horrible.
Wow.
And I had one woman say to me, I'm so scared, Didi, she would call me Didi, like Auntie, I'm scared to go in for birth because the first time she had preeclampsia and she had eclamptic seizures. Like she had eclampsia in the ambulance going to the government hospital. So her mind is blank, like she just had an emergency. They got the baby out. Can't remember how they did it because I wasn't with her, but she said, I can't remember my first birth, so I'm terrified about going into labor the second time around. But some of these hospitals, they let me pay to be a doula. So they would let me pay, it was 500 rupees, so maybe £5 for a
What do you mean?
pass. So I would have to go with a photo and go to the administration and explain, like, can I accompany, because I said I'm a medical professional, I don't have a license, so I won't practice, but can I observe in the labor ward and give emotional support to the people that I know from the local community because they want me to come in with them. And I had to use my white privilege a bit and foreigner. And they were, they said, oh, you're a foreigner, you can come and watch, but you can't do anything, you can't intervene, you can't do anything medical. I said, that's fine. It's just these people are young and, they're scared. And I kind of had to make a way and say, I'm interested to see how you do birth in your hospital, blah, blah. And so, I used to get a path. I still have them in my little memorial things, memory box. I have like a little pass stamped with, all official, like bureaucracy from the British that we left in India with all the terrible things we did, but lots of bureaucracy. So I would pay to get a pass and then I could support the people that I knew. So they would call me in labor and then I would go in with them. But it was the same thing, just like a line of people all lined up in our local hospital. And they were all in labor. They were all on their backs. They all had Syntocin and drips in. They had no pain relief, no gas. There was no such thing as gas in air. There was no epidurals. There was nothing. So it was like seeing people in excruciating pain. And it was horrific. And they had no other way. Like, it was just like, this is the way. Get on with it. Like, suck it up. And they knew it. Like, they knew if they go to the hospital, this is going to happen. Of course, they didn't really know in detail for the first time, but they would get, all of them would have episiotomy without every
Everybody.
first-time mother, every single person, episiotomy. Sometimes fundal pressure, or I can't remember the Christanov, what's it called? The maneuver? Can't remember. I know it as fundal pressure, where they push on the uterus.
Yeah. So you were a midwife?
Yeah, I had a degree. I have a degree of midwifery from the New College of Mexico, the College of New Mexico in El Paso, Texas. I didn't
I never knew
license.
you were I never knew you were a midwife.
Oh, so I didn't license in America because I never planned to stay in America.
Okay.
And then I ended up living in the Philippines for 5 years. I went there to help set up a birth center for 2 years, but I stayed for 5. I thought I would stay there forever, but then
Oh,
life
really?
happened and I moved to Hong Kong as part of the same kind of group. But then I worked
Okay.
with people coming off substance abuse, which is quite similar, like staying up with people in the night, giving them foot massage, saying you can do this. It's quite similar to coming off heroin. Um, being there are a lot of similarities. Um,
Oh,
and then I went to India as with some same colleagues, and I invited my Filipino midwife to come with me. So in India, we worked with people on the street and we worked with the very wealthy. So we worked with very wealthy Indians, Japanese, all nationalities, British, American, Australian, New Zealand, Kazakhstan, German, French, all kinds of people
mm,
in private hospitals. And then I searched for high and low for obstetricians that would work with us as midwives because there's no midwifery culture in to say there's no midwifery culture is a lie. So there is a dye culture. Dyes, they're like traditional birth attendants,
right.
but they tried to eradicate them because
Of course.
the infant birth the infant death rate, mortality rate was high in places. But it wasn't the dyes' fault, it was the whole system's fault. But they blamed the
Right.
dyes, of course, and tried to eradicate them. And then they tried to bribe them and say, if you bring people into the hospital and they register, then you will get a certain fee for each person that you bring in the hospital. So that birth
There's the
became
money again.
institutionalized. And the dyes are the healers of the community. So I got to know who is the local dye in my area, and it was a very normal area. Like it wasn't. We were the only white people that lived there. Me and my 2 colleagues, and then we had Filipino, Nepalese, and Indian colleagues. So we were a mixed community, and we had language. We learned the language. We learned how to speak Hindi and Urdu, and when we were going on the train to meet our private clients, the local people would call out to us and say, Didi, come and drink tea with us. Because they were like, who are these foreigners? Like, what are they doing here? So we would go and drink tea with them. And then we would talk to them and sit on the ground. They just lived under the stars and they had like some shelters in the rainy season. Otherwise, they just lived and slept under the sky. And
Oh,
and some of them were born there and they birthed their own children there and grew up there. And then their children are now having babies because it's time has gone on. But
mhm.
they would tell us about their pregnancies and they would invite us to be their friends. And then we would say, then I'd say, where are you going for maternity care? And they would be like, oh, don't go. Or they might show up lastminute.com at the government hospital, but because it costs money and they got abuse because they were the caste system was dismantled or disbanded, but
Right.
the mindset of the caste system is still there. So they were the untouchables or the delete, they call them Dalits, and they were darker skin. So there's racism and colorism in there as well. And they live in the sun. So of course they're darker skin, but
Yeah.
also from their tribal background was also darker skin. So there was a racism and casteism and all the things, poverty. So
Hmm.
these people got treated bad, bad.
Oh,
And
they really did.
if I went in with them sometimes because of my whiteness and my foreign, they would be a bit shocked. Oh, foreigner is here, best behavior. But other times it didn't,
Didn't
nothing.
impact them.
So I saw pregnant people being slapped just in an antenatal, like being slapped just because no reason. And then all the things, episiotomies, like rough hair, but shouted at for having babies. So I would stop the doctors sometimes and just be like, excuse me, You know, they don't
Yeah.
have a choice in reproductive health. There's no point shouting at her for being pregnant 8 times. Do you think she has a choice of conception or any kind of reproductive choice for how many babies she has? No. You need to talk to the men, not shouting at these women.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
And actually, I mean, one more thing, in the hospital, it's the same. In the private hospitals with the elite care where people are paying maybe £50,000, like £80,000
wow.
for a birth. That's just for the birth. 900 1,000 rupees just for, you know, I don't know, 20, £30 for a consultant fee every antenatal. But when they went into hospital, they had a similar level of obstetric violence under some guise of, we want to save you. So they would actually do all the interventions under the guise of, we need to help you. And then once all the interventions were underway, then they had to save people by doing instrumental birth, because you get 10,000 rupees. You can charge 10,000 more to the client if they have an instrumental birth. You can charge 70,000 for the epidural. So, you know, the people left the hospital saying, oh, the doctor saved me. And I left the hospital feeling sick. And I had to talk to some of them afterwards, you know, 6 months later, and say, would you like some feedback? You think they saved you, but everything in that birth led to them having to do that intervention. And it wasn't because you were powerless.
Right.
You can have another birth and you can be in control and have a powerful birth. That's mad.
It's stomach churning, and it makes me so angry that people are just dehumanized. Why is money more important than life? Why does money always have to be more important than life? And I know that, I mean, in extreme cases, yes, there is personal and individual blame and fault. However, when we look at it systemically, I know there's a culture of blame at the moment, and that midwives are being blamed for everything that's going wrong, and it's all their fault because the institutions don't necessarily want to take accountability. But it's almost like, well, it's not like, it is that midwives are going through an education system. They go in potentially not knowing about birth and midwifery care, maternal health, infant well-being. They can go in to this completely blind. So if the only form of education that they're receiving, the only form of mandatory education that they're receiving is misleading and harmful and complicit in obstetric violence and racism, and it's just steeping with gender-based violence, we can't actually fault solely the midwives. Yes, there are individuals that are not great people, but the majority of them go into that that area of care because it's something they're passionate about. They're driven by the emotive element of being a midwife, and it's the education system that's harmful. And I really want people to understand that, especially in the UK, the education system is very Eurocentric. I mean, we don't even have images of Black bodies consistently to show ailments. I've experienced myself on multiple occasions things not being recognised just because of the colour of my skin. Even when my son had chickenpox, I was told to just give him alternate with Calpol, and then the following week when I went back, it was Calpol, ibuprofen. I didn't give him the ibuprofen because I didn't have any at home at the time, and I happened to see another doctor in between that said, "Don't you dare, because it's a chickenpox."
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's the education system. They're not making space for the global majority. And that's where a lot of the harm is coming to fruition. And people, I guess the point I'm trying to make, people are placing the blame on individuals, but we need to start holding the institutions accountable. And just listening to you talk, and I mean, I've always had a very focused lens on the UK until I moved out of the UK and spent some time in other areas. But it's the same everywhere. I mean, the term obstetric violence started in Venezuela. That alone should tell us it's everywhere. People are being harmed everywhere. And it's all about power, control, and money. But the problem is, in England, I mean, I hate the term first world country because it's one world. Also, where's the second? How do we go first, skip second, and jump to third? Where's the rest of it? And who told us we were third? Because I know for a fact in Jamaica they had trains before England. A lot of the inventions were Black people. So the reason you deem us as behind and backwards is because you took everything we had. So actually we're ahead of you because we're rebuilding for a second time and a third time. And with what's going on around the world, a fourth and a fifth, and we will keep rebuilding. England hasn't rebuilt, it's taken. So we're not the third world country. But the point I was going to make with that is, if we're so advanced in the UK, why are we still not able to hold these institutions accountable? And I mean, I'm not expecting you to be able to answer that question at all.
But then the people blame each other and then it goes nowhere. Like everything you said, I agree 100%. Even today, I just read something about a man who's tried to rebuild his. He was asked, "Will you rebuild your house in Khartoum?" And he said, "Yeah, I will rebuild my home in Khartoum. We always rebuild.
Always.
I will stay in Sudan and I will rebuild my home because that's what we do." And I agree with everything you said. But I think when it comes to addressing harm, I actually spent 1 hour on a call with a midwife who I'd love to introduce you to today. And she was pulling her hair out with the culture of midwifery. She's 61. She's 61. I don't think she'll mind me saying. She's in her team is 2 people, her and 1 person. And she works on her day off. It's madness. And she says no. She spends half her time saying no. Will you come in to cover the birth center? No. Actually, the birth center is always closing down. Will you come in to cover delivery ward? No, I won't, because I have people on my team, on my list, expecting me to turn up at their home birth. But she talked a lot today. I'll let you talk to her because she needs to be the one, not secondhand information. But she was talking a lot about the current midwives now.
Yeah.
They haven't got a clue. It's not in their. I mean, she said we need to go back. Exactly what you said. We need to go back to the education and address what they're learning, because they're not learning the skills of midwifery that midwives need. And you can't blame the midwives.
Healthcare.
Yeah.
Not to be with women. They are learning the skills of healthcare. Like obstetricians are medical professionals, which is why they medicalize birth. Yes, it can be life-saving and it has its place, but not for every birth. And midwifery has almost become a supporting role to obstetric care. Whereas
100%.
It's a natural part of life and our evolution. I mean, if Black bodies, for example, were incapable, there is no way we'd be the majority. How did we get here in such large numbers if we could not procreate effectively without being induced, without having some form of assistance or augmentation? We wouldn't be the global majority.
Yeah, and she now is, carry on.
No.
Let's go grab a water.
Okay.
Yeah, carry on. I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No. I was on my way to a rant anyway, so it's probably a good thing that you stopped me. But I think the emphasis on education is what's really key, and it's being missed. When you look at the elements of obstetric violence and the power and control within that, the sexual element of it is a lack of education. The emotional harm is a lack of education. The coercive control is a lack of education. The physical harm and the physical violence is a lack of education. And the institutionalized harm and violence is the power and control that people do not see, or is perceived to be some sort of supporting umbrella, because of lack of education. If we can get the education right, all of the upcoming student midwives, all of the current midwives to a degree, can then have access to information to provide better practice, to eliminate obstetric violence, to reduce the mortality and morbidity rates that we're seeing that are constantly creeping.
Mm-hmm. It's all the layers of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, like I've been to Ibu Robin's place, which was a total privilege, but I saved up for it. I was meant to go in 2020 for my 50th with my friend who was 60. We were like, let's just do this. So we went on her advanced birth workers retreat, and Jenny Joseph was there. So that was my, I can't not go. Jenny's going, Ibu Robin, Deborah Pascali Vanero. It was just beautiful. And another really lovely midwife who was like a mother figure from Hawaii. She's a Hawaiian midwife, and she works with those mountain midwives with the people of Hawaii. Mm-hmm. But systems that work are systems that are nurturing and very expert in their midwifery and their knowledge. But they have systems of nurture. They nurture their people. Like her whole little place, they built it. They fundraised, they built it. It's beautiful. The people walk around in labor and they look at this little river through the gardens with fish in it. They can have a birth partner of their choice. Her whole hospital, it's a hospital, but they can't do cesarean there, but they do all the lab tests because they don't want people running around not being able to pay for the lab tests. So everything's free at access, and then people have an advised fee that they can pay. And some of the richest people don't pay, and some of them are white people, foreigners that come and access this beautiful model, and they don't pay. But most people pay. And if you can't pay, you still get cared for with every step of the journey. Yeah, and the midwives are loved. They're cared for deeply by Robin Lim, Ibu Robin. Ibu means mother. So she cares for her midwives and her staff, and they all care beautifully for the people. Same with Jenny Joseph, access, care for the people.
Well. I said to someone that even if we can't get the education, if there was nothing but kindness poured into maternity services, we would see a dramatic change, life-changing, life-saving, life preservation, with just a simple change of kindness. And the person I was having this discussion with argued the fact that that's not a realistic viewpoint. But actually, even what you've just said there, you've witnessed it, that kindness and being gentle and nurturing and supportive and compassionate, all of those things have had successful outcomes. And we know this. So why can't that be something that is rolled out across the NHS? Why can't that be something that's done with intention? As a progressive country, it's a very simple step to incorporate kindness to see the impact it can have on maternity care.
Yeah, I saw a trust turn around because of that. A new manager came in. I wasn't there previously, to be fair, but the reputation of the place was horrible. And I went there, and it was a new manager, new director of midwifery, or whatever it was, head of midwifery. I think not just midwifery, but it was a man, and he oversaw a lot of area. And there was a whole policy of no bullying. And in every room, there was a little placard that said there is a zero tolerance policy here of no bullying. And that includes the staff to the staff, the staff to the people. And it made a huge difference. In fact, I took someone from one hospital, a neighborhood doula's client with no English, barely any English, and her partner was at home with another kid, so he couldn't be there. So I took her to one hospital, and it was horrific. She was abused, she was ignored, it was terrible care. And she went home, she got sent home saying, you're only 3 centimeters or something, go home. But it was all loads of violation, emotional, physical, sexual, I would say. And she went home and cried and said, I'm not going back. And her husband said, what can we do? I said, oh, I'll call this other hospital. Doesn't matter if it's not her booking hospital, it's actually closer. So I called the hospital and I just said, can we come to you, please? Because she's had a bad experience at her booking hospital and your hospital is closer. And they said, of course you can come. So we went there, and it was like being in a different country, and it was 3 miles down the road, or less than. And they welcomed us with kind, smiley face. You know, the other place just pointed and looked away, like, go and sit over there. They didn't even talk to us. Go and sit over there with a flick of their hand. So rude.
But those people, and this doesn't negate their behavior at all, but a lot of those people is because they're being harmed by that very same system that they're trying to work within. They're trapped in a profession that is damaging to their mental and physical health.
So when people are nurtured and they work in a culture where it says be kind and we're not going to bully each other, then they can be kind, and then they can be kind to the people that access their service. But if the whole culture of a hospital or a service or part of a hospital is like bullying, harassment, not caring for their staff, I think midwives actually need some mental health support. All midwives should have
100%.
Mental health support, and all midwives should have proper training on anti-racism and actually do the work, and trauma support for themselves. Yeah, because I mean, when I go into hospitals previously, I would get triggered by abuse and violence because I grew up in violence and abuse. And so sometimes I would be silenced by people, and I felt bad as a doula afterwards because I just thought I couldn't advocate because I was silenced.
Compassion fatigue for us as well, going into spaces like that.
Yeah, but you think of the midwives, gosh, they see so much now and they don't have any support. They just burn out and leave because there's no one supporting the midwives. How can they carry on?
Yeah. Just implement some kindness.
Implement kindness. It's not even hard.
No. It's so much easier to be kind. Like, so I had 3 of our kids are young. So one is 5, one is 9, 10, sorry, just turned 10 and 12. And they're going through this phase where the 5 and the 12-year-old are arguing all the time. It's normally the 5 and the 9, or the 9 and the 10. The 5 and the 10, or the 10 and the 12. Sorry, they just had their birthdays, so I keep getting their ages mixed up. And I'm always like, sometimes when I'm tired of ranting on at them and telling them to be nice, I just say, be kind or be absent. Be kind or be absent. That's not my favorite thing. Be kind or be a nice way of saying just go away. And I was with my 12-year-old because we have these yes days where it's just me with one child, so we can spend time, talk, and do fun things. I remember there was one day, there was a woman walking down the street, an older lady, but she was walking by herself and she was carrying her head down and just walking kind of slow. And she looked a bit down. And I went and I told her that she was beautiful. I loved her outfit and she was giving off great energy. And he was like, why did you say that? Do you even know her? I was like, no, but it didn't harm me. I feel good now because she's smiling back at me. Didn't cost me anything. It wasn't hard. It didn't take time out of my day. We're en route to where we're going. I'm not late for anything. And she feels better about herself. That's the difference, being kind. I could have looked her up and down and grunted because she was in my way.
Mm-hmm.
But all that does is fill me with a bit more negativity. And it's as simple as that. I think sometimes we try to overcomplicate things when we're talking about policy reform and adjusting guidelines and all of the formal administrative work that goes into creating new cultures in healthcare. Too complex. Just be kind. Just try that. If we could try that for 18 months over every trust, I am confident that we will see some change. I am confident that we will see better outcomes. And I'm confident we will definitely see some staff retention. Because the reason they're leaving is because they are unhappy, because they are experiencing trauma and pain and violence and vicarious trauma because they're witnessing all of this harm.
Mm-hmm.
Kindness and compassion is the opposite. Who do I have to speak to get them to just try it for 18 months? If anybody knows, who have I got to speak to tell them to try our kindness for 18 months?
I love that example you gave of walking with your son, is it? So beautiful.
Yeah.
And then role modeling that to him, like I'm sure he internalized something good there.
I hope so.
But talk to, I don't know, there's someone, that midwife that I spoke about earlier, she'll tell you who to speak to because she spoke to someone this month. And she doesn't also, she just gets on with it. Like she's mentored so many brilliant midwives that we know at St. George's. She's mentored a lot of great people over the years. And people don't really know of this woman, but she's incredible. And she just spoke to someone really high up in the NHS this week or this month about the state of home birth in the UK. So she'll know who to speak to. It's really that simple, isn't it?
Yeah. I think maybe we're just overcomplicating things too much. We're so desperate to find a solution that there's a lot of oversight in the simplicity.
But there is lots of solutions. There are lots of things that need to be addressed.
And it's not
like
one
you
size
said,
fits all.
education. Yeah, education needs addressing. But you can be kind in the education as well, and inclusive in 2024.
Yeah. I mean, that again, a huge barrier. I mean, the way I put it when I was trying to explain to somebody else, and I won't call any names, but I'm an apple. I like apples. There's an orange in the same fruit bowl as me. It's not going to turn me into an orange. Doesn't mean that I dislike orange, because I also like oranges. If I now say the fruit bowl has apples and oranges, what harm am I doing? Because the apples still exist and people can still have an apple. I'm sure you know what I'm referring to. But again, it's bringing back simplicity. And I guess that's the maternal element of me, because I'm always trying to find ways to have conversations with my children. They're at varying ages, as I said, 5, 10, 12, and 22. So for my 5-year-old, for example, if I use certain language, she's not going to have a clue what I'm on about, and she'll probably look at me and just walk away because she's got that kind of attitude. Something like that, oranges, very easy to understand, very easy to communicate. And I think sometimes adults, grown people, need to be spoken to in a way where they can digest information so simply, because actually, if you think putting an apple and an orange in the same bowl is going to turn the apple into an orange, there's something wrong with you. Not the orange. Very simple.
Seriously.
Apples and oranges. Apples and oranges, and be kind. There we go.
There we go. We sorted it out.
Fixed it. There you go. Hand that to the government and tell them thank you. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. I feel like actually if we were left, we'd probably go on for hours, because I've got so many questions for you. But I'm also mindful I've got 48 hours to edit this and get it out. So.
My gosh, okay. Thank you. It was really lovely talking to you.
Are there any final messages that you want to share?
I think being kind, there's a saying, isn't it, that being kind costs nothing.
Yeah.
But it does sometimes cost some humility. And
it's worth a sacrifice to save lives.
But the benefits outweigh any struggle of act of kindness. So yeah, be kind. Be absent or be kind. I like that one. I'm going to use that. I'll be like, Leah said, be absent or be kind.
Thank you, Lina. It's been such a privilege talking to you. I can't believe it's taken so long. But thank you for your time. And of course, I'll send this over to you. And yeah, please keep in touch.
Now it's the right time. Lina. Looks like Lina, sounds like Lina. Just think eyeliner.
Why did you wait until the end to tell me that?
You didn't say my name until the end.
Oh, did I not?
Don't think so. It's okay, don't worry. People call me Lina all the time. I don't mind.
Lina. I know now.
Lina. Carolina. Just think, that is my full name, Carolina. So then you can remember.
Ah, I never knew that either. I'm learning a lot about you today.
I am also half mermaid.
Ah, see, that I know. I got that.
Yeah, blue hair.
And you love the water.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care.